for this opportunity to present Transdiagnostic Considerations of LGBTQ Clients. I'm Randy Hager, a licensed therapist, consultant, and life coach. My contact information will be given at the close of this 1-hour presentation. I sincerely welcome your comments, questions, and feedback. Much of my work in private practice is with LGBTQ clients. As a gay man, I have found the materials helpful in my therapy practice as well as in my personal life. While I'm being given a stipend, the NCA, for providing this recording, I am not being sponsored or paid beyond that. I will be basing much of my material on a 12-week class taken the summer of 2024 through Yale University's LGBTQ Mental Health Initiative. I am in no way representing Yale University or the author of those concepts. For further study and in-depth support, please consider acquiring the book published by Oxford University Press, copyright 2022, titled Transdiagnostic LGBTQ Affirmative Cognitive Behavior Therapy. That's a mouthful. I will be using excerpts from clinical psychologist and author Dr. Alan Downs' book, The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World. Second edition, copyright 2012 by Hachette Books. Stories and examples given during the presentation are not real people, but represent an amalgamation of people. This presentation gives mental health professionals an overview of this model of treatment. As we begin, it'll be helpful to define 3 terms used in this presentation. First, transdiagnostic. The prefix trans means across, through, or beyond, and also carries a sense of change and movement. You can see these meanings in action words like transcontinental, transmit, transform, and transcend. The second term is the constantly changing alphabet. Today I'll be using gay as an umbrella term to represent any person who identifies to some degree as a sexual minority. I know the LGBT community encompasses a continuum of individuals whose chosen identities are valid and whose define those terms in a variety of ways. Using a single word to refer to this group of people is not meant to invalidate or elevate any single label or persons within the LGBTQ community. My choice to use gay as an umbrella term will allow me to present this material in a succinct manner with linguistic simplicity, and also keep me from getting tongue-tied. The third term is LGBT-related stress. In the past 2 decades, several studies have shown that gay people are significantly more likely than their heterosexual and cisgender individuals to experience mood and anxiety disorder because of the stress they face as a result of their minority social status. Sadly, the data confirms much higher rates of stress and suicide ideation compared to their straight counterparts. This unique form of stress largely explains the excess burden of mental health problems exhibited by this population. This treatment focuses on helping gay clients understand this stress and the impact it has on their presenting concerns, as well as learning to build healthy coping skills and self-efficacy for managing this impact. Before we get into this treatment model, let's review the basics of cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, this newer model is based on. CBT can be described as a form of psychotherapy that helps people change negative thinking patterns and unhelpful behaviors to improve their mood and overall quality of life. It is a structure, goal-oriented therapy that teaches practical coping strategies for dealing with problems like depression, anxiety, and stress, focusing on the connection between your thoughts, feelings, and actions in the present. The goal is to help clients learn how to identify, challenge, and modify these unhealthy patterns, and to develop healthier ways of thinking and acting. People experiencing depression, anxiety, and other stress-related symptoms often use maladaptive emotional regulation strategies. In other words, they attempt to avoid or dampen uncomfortable emotions, especially the intense ones. What they don't realize is as they avoid and dampen these emotions, they usually are left with even more uncomfortable feelings and even more unhealthy behaviors. It's a vicious cycle. I often hear clients use words such as shame and guilt or feeling fake and empty when describing the after effects of avoiding uncomfortable emotions. So, the four basic CBT treatment principles are these. Number one, fostering mindful awareness and increased tolerance for emotions. We teach clients to identify feelings and triggers. Oftentimes, I'll use a feelings wheel to expand emotional vocabulary, provide clarity to themselves and others by using words that are more nuanced or more advanced. As I look at the center of that feelings wheel, there's the primary colors, and then as you move out, the colors become more nuanced, specialized. In the same way I explained, using other words, emotions, rather than the core 3 or 4 that we learned when we were a toddler, helps ourselves and others understand what we're feeling. Therapists often encourage awareness by using words such as non-judgmental, present-focused, experiential, rather than merely cognitive descriptions. People who are particularly analytical or in their head will often use lots of words, but then struggle to identify how that feeling feels or sits in their body. I'm reminded of a client who routinely made presentations as part of her position in a large company. She was an eloquent communicator, able to deliver inspiring stories that moved her audience to tears or laughter. But in my office, she struggled to actually feel anything when not in performance mode. I was constantly checking if she was present or just reciting what this client wanted me to hear or what she thought was the right answer. We educate clients that emotions can be adaptive and functional, not always bad or scary. In the case where somebody may feel this way, or I think they feel this way, I'll often assess for negative core beliefs. And I'll hear more often than not the belief that it's not safe to feel. To drill down further in this example, let's say the client doesn't feel safe being angry. Maybe they had a parent or somebody else who was unsafe with their anger. And I'll help them find other words that feel less scary or that explain more carefully. I'll use something like maybe an anger iceberg. Maybe you've heard of that. Other words that explore how they feel, new words, and ask how it fits or sits in their body. And I finally might ask them to explore, if that feeling is there now in the present, or is it a learned or an echo response from the past? The second CBT principle is re-evaluating automatic interpretations of threats in increasing cognitive flexibility. In other words, it's the C of CBT, cognitions and thoughts. So in this area, focus is not on eliminating or suppressing the negative thoughts, but rather replacing them with adaptive, realistic appraisals. We teach the dynamic interaction between the thought and the somatics, or the body sensations, to inform emotional experiences. An example I use with people is I'll say, imagine being stuck on the interstate and something has traffic stopped. How might you feel? And a lot of times they'll go to things such as they'll feel anxiety, they'll feel helpless, they'll have a racing heart, and they'll be sweaty. And we'll explore that a bit. And then I'll offer an alternative. What if you think of it as an opportunity? A lot of times they'll go with that and they'll think like to review texts or listen to music or podcasts, which often leads to realizing that they have a sense of empowerment, which feels more relaxing. That's the second principle. The third principle in CBT is changing action tendencies associated with maladaptive emotions. This is really talking about patterns. So we'll educate clients that talking about an experience or memory in session is not the same thing as experiencing it. So as we talk about it, we'll move from feeling it to how do we act on it? What's the behavior, the B of CBT in changing behaviors, not just thoughts and feelings, but the consequences of the behavior. And I remind them that, as much as we talk about the feelings or the cognitions in therapy, where this gets played out is in the B outside of session. What do you do with those thoughts and feelings when you're making decisions of how you're going to treat somebody else or decisions that you're going to make in your life? That's the B of CBT outside of sessions. It's important we connect the interpretation with the feeling and vice versa. One of my clients described this as a loop-de-loop. They said this way: it's how you feel impacts how you think, and how you think impacts how you feel. So they got the concept. Go back to that interstate. If you're thinking about being stuck in traffic, that's going to inform how you feel about it. But if you change the thought pattern, or if you start relaxed, you start realizing this is an opportunity. What can I do with this opportunity? So that loop-de-loop happens. I thought that was insightful from that client. We'll explore further. What else might you do when you're feeling whatever that is? What else might you consider doing? At this point, I remind people that trying something new doesn't have to be a lifelong decision. It may become that, but it's like trying on a new garment. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to change your entire wardrobe. Just try it on. See how it feels. See how it plays out. That concept can be insightful for some clients when they realize it doesn't have to be an all or nothing decision. It doesn't have to be a nail in the coffin. Try it. Give it a try this week, or try it for the next couple of weeks and see how that change feels or sits with you. I'm also reminding clients that change isn't always unhealthy or scary. It's just uncomfortable. It's a neutral. So let's move on. Finally, the fourth CBT principle: promoting correcting experience through internal and situational exposure procedures. Now, this procedure, I always, maybe it's evident to clients, but I always feel like this principle is more for my benefit than it is something I communicate to clients. Talking about avoiding feelings and what you were feeling during that time is actually kind of like exposure therapy. The more you talk about it, the less reactive your client becomes, and it reduces the impact. It allows clients to explore other actions or other feelings associated with the triggering event. What I kind of picture is in session, we're able to use a slow motion button, hit replay, pause, rewind, and I'll ask them, how did you do that? How did you change, or what changed when you replayed that experience? And I remind them that in the setting of therapy, we're able to do that pause, rewind, play, micro, slow it down, and in the real world, that it takes a while to practice having a different response. One of my clients summarized it this way: And I like how they said this. They said, I am 100% responsible for three things. One, identifying my feelings, even if they pop up spontaneously, they're my feelings. So I use I statements to talk about how I feel. And I don't judge it. I allow it to pop up, but I'm 100 responsible for feeling that feeling that pops up. I had one client say, you know, my feeling is like I can't control who knocks at the door, but I get to decide if they're a friend or foe and if I want to invite them in to stay for a while. I like that because the knock we can't control, the feeling that pops up spontaneously, it just is there, but we get to decide, um, whether we sit with that feeling, how we identify it, if we're accurate, inaccurate. Um, and I like that. Uh, they're also they also said that I'm 100% responsible for how I express my feelings. That includes how long I sit with it, how much weight I give it, right? So I like that. The client's responsible for feelings, how they express that feeling, and third, they're 100% responsible for behaviors I exhibit as a result or decisions I make. I thought, wow, that is insightful. That is worth repeating or remembering. I am responsible 100% for my feelings, identifying it, how I express them, and decisions or behaviors I make as a result. I go the next step and I say, therefore, we kind of do away with they made me feel or they made me angry. Instead, we'll use something like I felt X. I felt vulnerable. I felt embarrassed. So I expressed it by, and we talk about behaviors, or I decided to. And it really helps the client understand their role in their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So that's the overview of the four principles of CBT. You likely have your own way to describe and utilize CBT in your setting. But now that let's get to the meat of our presentation because we're going to adapt those four principles, CBT principles, to gay clients. And to do that, we're going to expand the four principles to six principles. Before explaining those six principles, let me quickly address the question of research. CBT is well known and accepted as a research-based model. What about the LGBTQ affirming model? Yes, it's also considered based on research. For brevity, I'll just mention the support. If you want to know more, you can contact me or read the cited sources in the textbook. This model is built on well-established research of general CBT and the following three bodies of research. One, the Unified Protocol for the Transdiagnostic Treatment of Emotional Disorders by David Barlow and colleagues, most recently reported in 2017. Two, Minority Stress Theory by Meyer, reported in 2003, and Harzen-Buehler in 2009. And then three, interviews conducted by the four authors of the Yale text with 33 mental health experts with extensive treatment of gay clients and in-depth interviews and reviews of 40 gay community members who have reportedly experiencing depression, anxiety, and other problems of emotional regulation. With that as the backdrop, let's make modifications to the four CBT principles for our gay clients. So those four principles of basic cognitive behavior therapy are adapted to the following six LGBTQ affirming CBT principles. First, normalize mood and anxiety symptoms as a common response to LGBTQ related stress. LGBTQ related stress is an additional layer on top of typical everyday stress and therefore makes gay people more likely to experience stress related mental health problems. Let me say that again. LGBT related stress is an additional layer on top of everyday stress, therefore makes gay people more likely to experience stress-related mental health problems, such as mood and anxiety disorders. Refer back to the high rate of suicide ideation in the gay population. You see this is just a common sense application. A shift is needed from personal deficiencies and blame to impacts of living as a sexual minority in the environment that is predominantly heteronormative. Again, I go back to an assessment that I use regarding negative core beliefs. The focus needs to be not on just processing the negative belief, but moving that negative belief to an adaptive core belief. Unlike many ethnic and racial minorities, many sexual and gender minority people develop their identities in isolation without the support of their peers, no role models or family members supporting. So that's principle number one. Number two, challenge inflexible internalized cognitions stemming from LGBTQ related stress. Growing up living in a culture that devalues, stigmatizes, and or stereotypes gay people can lead to internalizing those negative messages, of believing those about themselves. These messages, whether they're internal or external, can lead one to believe that they are disempowered or weak, that they have less value or don't deserve love, or a bad person, deviant, or others. Explore with your client how these LGBT-related stressors have shaped their thinking. Explore whether your client's thinking can become more self-empowering. The power of internal dialogue is profound. Listen for how they talk to themselves and reflect back to them. Is that true? Or where did you hear that message? Again, referencing Dr. Downs, a clinical psychologist and author of The Velvet Rage. He describes it this way. The truth is that the gay community grew up disabled. Not disabled by their sexual identity, but emotionally disabled by an environment that taught us that we were unacceptable and shameful. We readily internalize those strong feelings of shame into a core belief, I am unacceptably flawed. Down goes on to state, it crippled our sense of self and prevented us from following the normal healthy stages of adolescent development. We were consumed with the task of hiding fundamental truth of ourselves from the world around us and pretending to be something we weren't. At the time, it seemed like the only way to survive. Third principle, encourage assertive behavior and authentic self-expression to effectively cope with the consequences of LGBTQ-related stress. Some clients might silence their authentic voice, cover their gay identity, or take a passive stance toward current challenges. Not everyone needs to be publicly seen as an advocate, but everyone does need to be an advocate for themselves. That's what you're looking for in your clients, looking for that passivity or that sense of I'm not worthy to speak up for myself. I don't deserve to have a place at the table. I don't deserve to have a belief system that is congruent with who I am as a person. Help clients learn that LGBTQ related stress leads to unassertive thoughts and behaviors rather than finding their authentic voice as a peer who has healthy boundaries. One of the things I do with clients is I'll explore common maladaptive thoughts or behaviors, things to look for that are common sometimes in the gay community. Things such as hyper or hypo advocacy. This extreme, either direction, either out and proud and marching, holding the banners and taking socially or legal risks, or the opposite, avoiding it altogether or speaking publicly against LGBT rights or freedoms. That hyper or hypo advocacy is often a sign of somebody who's not comfortable with their sexual identity. Another example that we often see, we might explore, is code switching. And code switching is where you switch how you present. Yeah, I'm not talking about safety being a factor here. I'm talking about you're one way with your family, or you're one way at work, and you're another way with friends. Not the usual role adjusting, but significant switching of whether you wear colors, or whether you wear bracelet, or whether you wear your hair or wear makeup. Those things can be code switching and are an indication that I can't be myself around certain people. Another way that sometimes people are maladaptive or cope is fixations on sex or body image, either excessively avoidant of or excessively focused on. Lots of hours, lots of time, everything has to be meticulous. And another way is compounding of other symptoms associated with anxiety and depression. And this simply means that the amount of anxiety, the amount of depression, or the symptoms that seem excessive to the actual stimuli or the experiences they're having. That compounding may mean there may be this level of sexual minority stress going on in addition to the actual anxiety, depressive traits. Let's move on to the fourth principle. Validate gay clients' unique strengths, even if not recognized. I love this one. Convey to your client that the fact that they are presenting for treatment means they have already overcome some significant challenges in their life this far. A lot of times this isn't apparent to the client. The very act of exploring one's sexuality and or gender identity is something that most people never have to do. And that speaks to your client's courage and strength. The gay community includes important thinkers and artists and athletes. Just because we do not or did not know their private story does not diminish the resilience and growth they forged in the fires of adversity. A piece of homework that you might do is have a client who's struggling with advocacy for themselves, is to explore people from the past who later or eventually or overtly did come out as being part of the gay community, and see the success that they had despite the uphill battle. Finally, the fifth principle: build authentic relationships as an essential resource for every person's mental health. While this is true of everybody, right? We want to build a social network, a support system. This is especially true in the gay community. Clients may have been isolated, shunned, or devalued in their early relationships because of their gay identity, or because it didn't feel safe to be out. That isolation likely influences the way their current relationships take place. I think of things like attachment, trust, projecting. A lot of those things are forged or were developed in their ability to not connect early on, like when they're developing in as teen years or as children, that I'm different, I'm othered than my peers. And so that gets altered. Clients might struggle to build healthy relationships that are affirming and supportive. And this may be brought up, maybe hidden. They'll say something like, the main reason for therapy, and I don't have problems with my sexual identity. I just have problems with, or they'll say something like, I have a great sex life. I just struggle to find the right partner. Right? We're looking for that layer of how being a sexual minority is compounding what they're actually presenting for. So as we're visiting with them, as we find or we see in their intake that they identify as a sexual minority, but that's not what they want to work on, keep your antennas up, because that might actually be layering in to what they are presenting or the diagnosis you give. Just because a client is out does not mean they are honest with themselves or have authentic, healthy relationships with others. Often it's masked behind pressure to look like a successful gay person. I mean, you think about the pressure to conform, and then this hyper or hypo. We either shrink back or we become the CEO. We become the most best dressed. We become the most successful. We have to be the lead on our team. That pressure to overcompensate for what we internally feel unsuccessful or devalued or not enough is important to look for. One client articulated it when he said, if you're out, you no longer harbor that dirty little secret, but you likely do continue to hide your shame and insecurities behind the beauty that you manufacture. Dr. Downs, again, says it this way: gay men are the worldwide experts on style, fashion, etiquette, art, and design. We're experts at making things and people look good. Something about growing up gay forced us to learn how to hide ugly realities behind a finely crafted facade. Let's move on to the sixth principle. Recognize intersectional identities as a source of stress and resilience. Things like race and ethnicity, Black communities, Hispanic, Latinx. If you take like either one of those or any number of cultural things, again, look for the compounding or cultural stigma behind being a sexual minority. I know one client, he talks about his Hispanic ancestry, his Hispanic family, and in his circles, it's acceptable to be highly sexual, but it's not okay to be gay. So you can mess around, but it's not okay to own or identify as being attracted to males. Second area, social economics, pressure to have it all together. Oftentimes there's career suppression. There's a ceiling that is unspoken, but sexual minorities don't get the promotions or the opportunities that others have. It's not spoken. It's very covert or in between the lines. They call out too much for therapy appointments, or they're just off. They don't fit in. The chemistry is not what we want here. They're not a team player. Additionally, there's the cost for partners. If they need to pay more for a partner to have health insurance, if company offers that for partners. Adoption. If a couple wants to adopt, partners want to adopt, a lot of times the cost for that can be much higher. Or the children that they're able to adopt may have higher needs medically and financially. Another area culturally might be immigration status. Many who have questionable or uncertain immigration status have a fear of retaliatory reporting to ICE. So rather than compound their immigration status, they will hide or suppress their sexual identity, because that's like 3 strikes and you're out. It's almost a guarantee for some in their thinking that they're going to be deported or they're going to be singled out. One, their status, and then two, sexual minority. There's just too much. You're too much for our company, or you're too much, and they fear people knowing that about them, that they'll be called and anonymously reported. Another area is belief systems. And tongue in cheek, I like to shorten belief systems to BS. Religious trauma work is something that I do quite a bit of on the side. For many who have come out of a background or a strong religious background, there's a sense of losses if they feel like they have to leave their belief system or they were forced out of. Things like loss of community. People don't realize how much going to Bible studies or going to mosque or going to the synagogue or going to mass, that sense of community is stripped away. The sense of somebody will bring me a meal or will give me a ride because I'm in this community. That sense of purpose, when people have that ripped away, that sense of knowing what I'm working toward, the philanthropy that goes along with that, helping others, that sense of purpose can be stripped away. Or core values, their sense of I was made for this, or these are values that my community hold that I agree with, and that those can be stripped away if there's religious trauma and that belief system or BS is stripped away. Imagine too, let's take the BS, the belief system, away from religion and think of it. What if a sexual minority believes in financial conservatism, right? So financially, they're conservative. All of a sudden now, there's no place for them because in conservative circles, they don't belong morally, ethically, behaviorally, uh, right? But they also don't fit in the LGBT typical community because they're conservative in some ways. So they're shunned and they're left in the middle here, isolated without support and means to belong or ways to be involved civically. So there's any ways that these belief systems, you can take them any number of directions that creates tension or isolation from, the whole LGBT community or the conservative community or the heteronormative community. Once they start isolating, whether it's culturally, belief system, any number of these ways, it just creates more and more isolation that gives them lack of support. So what I would tell you is use what you know as a therapist about multicultural considerations and broaden it to other types of intersections that contribute to LGBTQ related stress. So now that we've identified the 6 LGBTQ affirming CBT principles, let's make some applications. First, use these concepts to be more informed as you work with the gay community. Are the symptoms learned responses for hiding or being a sexual minority? Has experiences coming to accept their identity or to survive feeling othered created unhealthy patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? Get the books and the workbook and move toward integration of one of your specialties. In these books and these workbooks are assessments. There's worksheets, there's charts, there's homework suggestions. There's a breakdown of how to guide clients through each module sequentially if you want to do that. Nothing else, they're an excellent tool to make you better informed or give you practical ways to apply these concepts in your therapy practice. And 3, use this content as discussion starters with your LGBTQ clients. The impact of LGBTQ related stress is probably understated or not known in their life. They think, I know who I am. These things I'm coming to therapy for are unrelated. Know better, be informed as a therapist, and look for how these may be underlying or undercurrents of things that they're coming to you for. And finally, while it may not be justified or advisable to give its own diagnostic code, it still transfers with other presenting diagnosis. So it's still excellent information to use as you work with clients. Now, finally, let's wrap up. This is important. I know you're probably thinking of putting your papers away and finally this video is about done, but this is important because if you're going to take the quiz, for your CEUs, this review will help you see, did I write down everything? Did I get an overview correctly of the 6 principles and things that I might need on that quiz? So take a look and check your notes here before we wrap up. So we learned how the 6 principles of LGBTQ affirming therapy are based on the established CBT principles and are likewise research-based. This is a research-based treatment plan. And finally, let's review the 6 principles. Number 1, normalize anxiety and depressive symptoms as typical for LGBTQ-related stress. Number 2, challenge the inflexible, internalized negative messages. Number 3, encourage assertive behavior and authentic self-expression. Number 4, validate existing strengths unique to their journey thus far. Number 5, build authentic relationships. And number 6, recognize and build on intersectional identities. As promised, here is my contact information on the screen. I welcome your questions, comments, and feedback. And those of you that want to have more conversation, reach out and we can do that informally at another date or as you have time or as I have time. Thanks again to the Nebraska Counseling Association, and thank you for joining me for today's Transdiagnostic Considerations of LGBTQ Clients.